Welcome to the Undragoned podcast, focusing on fortifying the people of God and slaying dragons.
All right, so episode 6 of Undragoned. For this one, I want to share with you something that's been on my heart for this year, something that I've been trying to grow in as a father, as a husband, as a man, and that's the idea of sabotaging well. And so I want to share a quote with you from one of my favorite books, Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. So here's what he says. Enemy-occupied territory. That is what this world is. Christianity is the story of how the rightful king has landed. You might say landed in the skies, and is calling us to take part in a great campaign of sabotage. Now, this quote seems to resonate with us more and more in this day and age. I mean, just in 2020, we saw lines starting to be drawn. People that we thought were on our side are not on our side. We got to see where people really were on the spectrum of faith, politics, etc. I'm thinking also of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, probably Lewis's most famous chronicle. I mean, during the White Witch's reign, it was winter, okay? And even though the winter-esque landscape is enchanting to us, it's also supposed to represent bleakness, frigidity. It's meant to represent death, turning from a season of life, spring and summer, to a cold, bleak landscape. And people that we thought were on the Narnian side were no longer on their side. I mean, Thomas told Lucy that some of the trees had turned over to the White Witch, and of course we know about the White Witch's army that she had. So we live in enemy-occupied territory, and it can be challenging and scary to us, right? We can just have some thinking about disagreeing with people, thinking about engaging with someone, either in our work, on social media, people we disagree with, that we want to share the gospel with. It can be scary knowing that we're in a minority view, knowing that our side, our position, our worldview is looked down upon. And it can be easy to be trapped by that fear. But Christ has something different in mind for us. He's calling us, while being in enemy-occupied territory, to sabotage that world for his glory. And I want to move on to this great campaign of sabotage. Now, it'd be easy to conflate the word great with these large-scale acts, works, where we're doing something that either goes viral, we do something that is in front of a bunch of people. It's just on this grand scale. We tend to think on this grand scale here, and hearing the words, the phrase, the great campaign of sabotage, it'd be easy to start thinking in that way. Like, what can we do to have maximum impact? And that's a noble desire. Of course, we see in the church that kind of desire get twisted, and like seeker sensitive movement is an example there. But the thing is, to sabotage well, to really take part in the great campaign of sabotage, is start small. So what I mean by that is, whenever the Narnians got together during the White Witch's reign and toasted to Aslan's name, that was an element of sabotage. Not giving in, not giving allegiance to the enemy of this earth, but to giving allegiance to the king of it all. So thinking back to some of the past episodes from the guests that I've had on Undragoned here, just take this last one with Pastor Brian, singing psalms and hymns, spiritual songs to one another, gathering around the table and singing those songs, glorying in the infinite goodness of the Lord. That's an element of sabotage. talking with Bradley about the Old Testament and how we see the glory of Christ in Genesis 1, and up until the very end in Revelation, how we overlook the Old Testament, but we see God's glory from the outset. So opening up the Bible, talking about how Christ permeates every single page of the Word, it's an act of sabotage. When I talk with Rich about how we should approach 2021 and beyond, and how Christians should gather together, they shouldn't be afraid of gathering together physically in a church to worship the Lord, to break bread together, to give honor and glory to the King. At the foundation of this, thinking about my conversation with Luke Wayne of Carm, is this idea of gratitude, where our hearts are full of gratitude and thanksgiving to the Lord. And that manifests itself by these things, by wanting to understand the Word more, by singing to one another, by meeting together. And guess what? Those things the Lord uses, these little deeds, these little acts of sabotage, He uses them for His glory to do mighty, mighty things. The Lord does much with little. And I just want to close with this. Lewis calls this land enemy-occupied territory. Now here's the thing. The enemy does occupy this territory. But occupation does not mean ownership. The earth belongs to one person. And that person came, lived, died, rose, ascended for it. So don't lose sight of that. The earth is the Lord's. The enemy cannot win. It occupies it for a time, but it's the Lord's. And spring will come again. Before I get to the book review for this episode, I do want to highlight one quick thing with the podcast. We're starting to go towards social media. So we're starting on Instagram, and my wife is the brains behind that whole operation. I'm not very social media savvy, but she is. And so if you can find us at Undragoned Pod on Instagram, we would love to have you follow and engage with our posts. That would mean a lot. And then maybe down the line we'll get onto other platforms like Facebook, Twitter, maybe Gab. If you're familiar with Gab, it's a up and coming social media site that a lot of conservative, Christian minded people are going towards. So time will tell, but we might get onto those platforms as well. But yeah, Instagram at Undragoned Pod. Now, for the book review for this episode, I want to review not a very well-known work. So it's called Mr. Bliss. It's by this random, unknown author by the name of John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. Now, you might just have realized that I'm talking about J.R.R. Tolkien, which he's actually one of the most famous authors of all time. But Mr. Bliss is definitely not his most famous work, but it is wonderful in every respect. So this story was published posthumously after he passed, and it's a children's story that Lewis wrote and illustrated. He wrote and he illustrated it. It's phenomenal, and it's just this wacky kind of eccentric adventure where this guy named Mr. Bliss, he goes on an adventure, and he meets all sorts of different critters. There's a girabbit. It's a giraffe and a rabbit combined. That was my daughter Lucy. That was her favorite when we were reading it to her. It's just a very fun story, and it's one of my goals as a parent to do something like that for my kids, to create a story and even illustrate it. I think that would be a lot of fun. And for all you parents out there who are brilliantly creating stories, telling stories to your kids, this one is sure to be inspirational for inventing new characters, inventing new animals, where your kids can have fun with it. So check out Mr. Bliss. The copy that I have, it has, so it's divided into halves. The first half, it's his book written in print with the original artwork next to it. But the second half is almost fully Tolkien's original work, where he hand wrote the dialogue, hand wrote the description, the prose, along with the original artwork. So it's really, really fascinating to see that side of Tolkien. Because, of course, we know about Lord of the Rings, know about The Hobbit, maybe some of the other tales within Middle Earth. But Mr. Bliss is very different, and it's a breath of fresh air. So go ahead. I totally recommend Mr. Bliss to you. It's a lot of fun.